Welcome to Virtual Presentation Success. Now, this is the dream, that you will have the ability to work from home. It'll be convenient, comfortable, and so easy. That's the dream, right? Well, the reality is that there's often some frustrations. I'm sure that you probably maybe could even relate to this guy. I'm going to share a video. This is less than a minute long.
The question is, how do democracies respond to those scandals?
And what will it mean for the wider region? I think one of your children has just walked in. I mean, shifting sands in the region. Do you think relations with the North may change?
I would be surprised if they do. Pardon me.
So what's the secret to having good virtual presentation skills? The secret is curiosity. As Albert Einstein said, "I am neither clever nor especially gifted. I am only very, very curious." So, are you curious? Do you want to look professional online? Really know and engage your audience? Make your messages memorable and present with greater confidence. Let's talk about how you can look professional online. Here is another video I will be sharing on the top 5 ways to look bad on Zoom, or actually really any online platform. I think this is about just over 3 minutes long. And I'll hit play. I'm Diane Windingland with Virtual Speech Coach, and we'll take a tour of each of these 5 ways to look bad on Zoom. The first way to look bad is to have a bad camera angle. I'll give you an example of that. Often people have it so low that you get the double chin, or you get to look up at the nose. Or bad lighting is a big problem. All too often, people don't consider where their light source is coming from. You don't want your light source to come from behind you. This is a little bit better. Now I have my light source coming from the side. But even better would be if I were to close that window shade and turn on a light source that will light my face from the front. Ideally, you could sit facing a window, but that isn't always going to work, especially if you have a meeting at night. You can use a lamp behind your computer, or you could buy something like one of these little selfie lights, which is what I'm using right now. I have a piece of cardboard taped to the back of my monitor, and then I have this just clipped onto that. Also consider your background. Does it portray the image you want to portray? And is it going to be distracting, either because maybe there's a messy bed in the background, or dirty dishes, or even just things that may distract people because they're looking at them wondering what they are and maybe even making judgments about you. So try to keep it clutter-free. And I use a virtual background just because then I don't have to worry about my background. So how does this feel when I'm talking to you and I'm not actually looking at the webcam? Maybe I'm looking at your face. Maybe I'm looking at my own face. Maybe I'm looking at notes. You don't know. All you know is that I am not making eye contact with you. I may be actually looking at your face, but it doesn't feel like I make eye contact with you until I look directly into the webcam, and then you feel the eye contact. So look into the webcam when you're speaking to make eye contact. Does your clothing reflect who you want to portray, and is it something that doesn't distract or look too garish? I'm going to try on a few different shirts so you can just see how things look different. This is a basic professional type of shirt that I'm wearing now. Now I'm wearing a basic white t-shirt, which probably would be okay in person, but on video it just glare. Now I'm wearing a black t-shirt, which is probably a better choice than white, but still it's rather blah. Now I'm wearing a casual shirt with a pattern. I suggest you stay away from patterns as well as all white and all black. Look your best and don't make these top 5 mistakes. In a moment, you will have a chance to be in a small group and try to fix a few things. You should also have this in your handout with camera angle, lighting, distracting background, eye contact, clothing, and anything else. Just keep in mind that you are visible and you want to come across as professional and easy to be seen. For example, if you're talking with seniors, their ability to see your face is really important because often they are hard of hearing, and being able to see your lips move will help them with the understanding. How can you really know and engage with your audience? Well, the good news is that much is the same in person and virtually. You want to start with why. First of all, what's your why? Go ahead in the chat box, put a reason why you are giving these presentations. Why is it important to you? I know it's your job, so aside from it being your job, why else might it be? Then you also need to know, why does your audience care? Why are they on these meetings? Some factors that can affect an audience's why are demographics, age, gender, religion, ethnic background, occupation, education, etc. Knowledge level of the topic. So maybe they have a lot of knowledge, maybe not, maybe they want to know more. Attitude toward the topic. Some people might have a negative attitude, others might have a positive attitude. And of course, their perceived need. What's different in virtual meetings? Some virtual meetings, pros and cons. So here's some pros. Reduced cost, perhaps. Convenience, especially if you just get to be at home. It can be time saving. There's no travel associated with it. And of course, health safety for everyone involved. What about some cons? Technical challenges, that's a big one. Decreased personal contact, and that does have an effect. There can be distractions on both sides. And online meeting fatigue. I'd like to know, and you only get to pick one choice, which of the cons of virtual meetings are you most concerned about? Go ahead, and you only get one answer here. And no surprise, technical challenges was the winner, with a few people also being concerned about decreased personal contact, distractions, and online meeting fatigue. Some engagement techniques that you can use that are easy, or I would say easy-ish, would be to ask questions. That's a great engagement technique. To tell a relevant story, to share your screen, which you will be doing for the presentation. Perhaps share a video, and as you can see, sometimes that works out and sometimes it doesn't. Share a file or link in the chat box. Of course, you have to make sure that they know how to use the chat box. And this is really easy. Ask them to write something on paper. Maybe ask them to grab a sheet of paper so that they could take a few notes. And this actually will probably be very comforting to them because taking notes on paper is something they're very comfortable with. Things that might be more challenging and that you'd probably only use with groups would be the chat box, polls, the whiteboard, which frankly with Zoom, it just sucks time. It's not that great. There's the breakout rooms, which you would only use with groups. How can you make your messages memorable? There are several ways that you can engage. You can tell stories that are relevant. You can have snappy openings and impactful closings. You can use effective visuals. Let's talk about stories first. And I'm going to start with an example story not related to this topic at all. But this is a picture of me at age 3. Big smile, big teeth, bad hair. My mother was just trying to get my bangs straight, and instead they got shorter and shorter. Maybe you've had one of those mom haircuts. Well, one day I got revenge of sorts on my mom. Not that I really meant to, but she had brought me to work to meet her boss and coworkers. And one look at her boss, and I was in awe. She was perhaps the ugliest woman I have ever seen. Long, pointy chin, hooked nose, bushy eyebrows over beady eyes. I looked at my mom. Mom, she looks just like the Wicked Witch of the West. There was complete silence until my mother turned to me and said, Diane, don't you mean like Glinda, the good witch? No. Glinda was pretty. Fortunately, the boss lady laughed, and I had a newfound power, the power of the spoken word. Now we're going to have a little pop quiz. Remember those in high school? I hated them. The teacher would call on me and my mind would go blank. But I will have you answer in the chat. And the first question is, how old was I? Do you remember how old I was? Let's see if you remember. Yep, lots of people remember 3. That's how old I was. That's right. So congratulations, you did very well on the pop quiz. The point I'm trying to make here is that when you tell a story, it is much more memorable than merely stating facts. Because stories are concrete. People can imagine them in their minds much better than an abstract concept. Facts tell, but stories sell. Stories can put facts into an emotional context as well. And very quickly, some storytelling basics, as perhaps you craft a story about a client or a patient to tell. This is what I call the shape of a positive ending story, where you have the setup, who, when, where, what is the current situation. There always has to be a challenge or a conflict or the story's boring. There's usually some rising action, a turning point, some falling action, and then a resolution. Something changed. So in the story I told you, this is how that would plot out. The situation and the people was my mom bringing me to work when I was 3 years old. The conflict occurred when I said the boss looked like a witch. There was rising action when my mother pleaded with me that I really meant Glenda, right? The turning point was when the boss laughed, all was well, and I had a newfound power, the power of the spoken word. Now, when you are telling a story, you want to have your client relate to it. And you want to make your client be the hero of their own story, or if you're using an example, the client in the example should be the hero of the story, not you, but you or the service or product would be helping the client become the hero of their own story and have a positive outcome. What client success story can you tell? Your openings and closings are like the bookends of your presentation. And the best openings typically start with what I call the 3 Ps. A little bit of pep, where you get their attention, which often could be a story, a startling statement, even a question can get their attention. Then you shortly want to go into a promise where you're going to state some sort of benefit. And then most adults like to know a little bit of a preview, like where you preview your points and give them a pat. You want to end with the 3 Ps in reverse. You want to quickly summarize the points, maybe even the most important point. You want to revisit the benefit. Let them remember why they listened to you in the first place, and have some sort of call to action. Ideally, a single call to action, one thing that would be the next step. Now let's talk a little bit about effective visuals. There are 4 basics of effective slides. 1 idea per slide, minimal text, engaging visuals, and they need to be relevant to the point you're making. What do you think the number 1 problem is when it comes to visuals? Go ahead and put that in the chat to everybody, what you think the number 1 problem might be. I might say too much information. In fact, you probably didn't even notice significance. Significance was lost because there was so much information. What do you think the number 2 problem is? Now, I'm not going to have you put that in the chat. Instead, we're going to experience problem number 2. These are a dozen virtual presenter basic competencies. Number 1, the presenter's audio is not easily heard. Okay, I'm going to stop right there because it's starting to become blah, blah, blah. Here's problem number 2. People don't listen well when they are reading. So if you have a lot of text and you're talking at the same time, it'll be annoying. Plus, they're not going to really be listening to you, or they're not going to be looking at the slide. Most people will look at the slide though. Here's a little bit better of a way to handle that, and that is to have bullet points come in one at a time. And you can pause and let them read the 1 bullet point and then even paraphrase it. So as a presenter, you want to make sure that you're easily heard and understood. You want to be aware of and eliminate distracting background noises. So that is better. Even better might be to have 1 point on a slide with a visual. How can you present with greater confidence? There's 3 keys: content, questions, and technology. Content. Practice makes better. Now, you may already know your content really well, and you want to practice the content first before you throw in the delivery and the technology. You can speak from an outline in case, for whatever reason, the slides don't work. You can chunk your content into smaller bits and practice those chunks if you don't have time to practice all the way through. A great way to practice your content is to discuss it with other people. And then I would suggest that you record yourself on Zoom actually delivering the content, knowing that if you are practicing by yourself, you won't have the Q&A time, but you could certainly even practice with someone else just to role play it. And space out your practice. Don't just practice the night before. Questions. How can you handle questions? The best thing is to actually prepare for questions that they might ask and practice answering questions, and remember what your key messages are so that you reinforce the key messages as you practice. Here is one technique for answering questions that works most of the time, and it's called PREP, P-R-E-P, where P stands state your position or your point, give a reason for your position, give some evidence or an example, which might even be a little story, and then restate your position. If you have meandered off topic, getting back and restating your position at the end is a great way to cement the main idea. Now I'll give you an example. If you can imagine a time before coronavirus and you were asking me, gee, I'm thinking about going on a vacation. What type of vacation should I go on? I might say, and I'll do the prep. The point I would say is you should consider going on a cruise for your next vacation because, and here's the reason, because it's so very convenient. And then I might give the example. A couple of years ago, my husband and I went on a 22-day cruise with 18 ports. It was so convenient not to have to lug luggage from one place to the next or worry about accommodations or even necessarily where we were going to eat. It made it a blissful experience. So if you want to have convenience and not have the hassle, I suggest that you look at taking a cruise for your next vacation. So there is an example. Now, I'm going to ask one person, oops, let me go back here, one person to share a story, a prep, either on a vacation destination, a restaurant, a product, or service. Let's talk a little bit about technology. You need to check connectivity and practice the platform. Now, you don't have to be perfect. People will give you some grace if you're not perfect, and you learn things as you go. So I obviously need to check why there is some sort of buzzing noise that I was not aware of. That I will check that after this. But you want to check your upload and download speed and your connectivity. When you're using Zoom, you need to have at least 1.5 or 3 megabytes per second, both uploading and downloading, keeping in mind that other people may also be using their devices and taking up some of that bandwidth. One thing you can do is to do a speed test. So if you just Google speed test, like I've done here, I Googled speed test, and then I'm going to run a speed test. And this might just take a few seconds. It should only take a few seconds. Let's see how it goes. So they're testing the download. Most people have pretty decent download speeds. Now the upload speed, that's the tricky one because your audio and video quality is dependent on your upload speed. So I'm doing pretty well for upload and download speed. And you might want to consider upgrading your internet plan. If you don't have good enough speed or you find challenges, you can do that. Practice with each other and with senior friends. I cannot stress how critical it is to have a little bit of practice because things will come up. There are things you're not aware of, and it'll just give you a little more confidence because there will always be something that comes up. But if you have 10 things that come up, you're going to be overwhelmed. And if it's only 1 or 2 things, it's like, hey, I got that. Have backup plans. So I actually have my phone set up on a tripod in case this didn't work. Now, it would not have been ideal, but at least I have a backup plan. And then you want to use a checklist. That there's things you should do several days in advance. There's practice, there's equipment set up. You maybe even need to make sure your client or your patient has the instructions. And then there's things you can do right away, 30 minutes prior to your appointment or appointments. So I will be putting that in the chat and also sending it to you as well. So if you can apply the tips that you've learned today, you can look more professional online. You can really know and engage with your audience. You can make your messages memorable, and you can present with greater confidence.